A Photographic Memory follows an incredible personal journey for Rachel Seed. Rachel's mom was a world traveling journalist and photographer who passed away when Rachel was a baby. The film is part of the Chicago International Film Festival on October 23rd and 24th. Rachel is also a Chicagoan, and we went to college together. I'm so proud of her. I'm so proud of you. Congratulations on the film, and I'm this is amazing. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Rudy. Yeah, it's great talking to you.
I,
I
I
don't know
believe
how many years it's been since we've seen each other.
it's been a long time since we've seen each other, and when we messaged each other, it had been about 15 years since we've actually like connected. So this is so awesome. But when I saw that you were going to be part of this film festival, I was like, I need to talk to Rachel just because I think college is one of those times where you really are finding yourself. You are
Yeah.
your creativity is coming out. You're really showing your passion. You kind of are just kind of becoming a different human being, and that's kind of that time that we both got to connect and really know each other. So I really want to talk a little bit about your journey, and also your mom, which is the centerpiece of this film.
Yes, yeah, totally. That
First of all, let's go ahead and talk. At what point did you know your mom's story or what had happened to her? I mean, were you very young? Did your dad talk to you? Was it other kids? Like, how did you kind of come to terms with this?
I mean, because I didn't remember her, she died when I was a baby. So, when you're a kid, you just take for granted whatever your situation is. You don't really have anything to compare it to. So I knew she wasn't there. And um, I think the family would tell me things here and there, but I didn't get like stories all the time or anything like that growing up. Um, I just had sort of like vague ideas of who she was and what she did, but it wasn't very clear to me. So it wasn't really until I started making the film that I started to fill in the picture of of who she was.
I mean, just to have these incredible archives. I mean, she worked Time Life, Scholastic, the Chicago Sun Times. I mean, there's so many different publications that she was a part of, and to be able to see this history. How did you know that these things existed, or there was maybe more archives that you had, in your home or in your possession?
Um, I didn't know the extent of what existed. It really was like a hunt and a dig and lots of inquiring to people who knew her, and people would give me different tips about things that she created, and then I would like go looking for them. So it definitely didn't happen all at once. But like the very first thing that I found or that I knew of was these box sets of interviews with photographers. They were audiovisual programs. So there'd be like the photographer's photograph and their voices. They were not moving images. Those were published in the 70s. And so I saw those at my dad's house. And then I just became curious, like what else, like where were the raw materials? Because she must have interviewed these guys, and like imagine if I could find these raw interviews and hear her talking for hours and hours. I just thought that would be a great way to get to know part of her. So that's when I started hunting for that. And then that kind of led me to a lot of other things.
Yeah, and with doing these types of interviews, sometimes you might have a few minutes beforehand, in between interviews, some conversations afterwards, which don't always get put into the final product. So you really get a sense of who somebody is based on those conversations. What did you feel like? What types of emotions overcame you when you started seeing getting to see her, react, getting to see her work, kind of getting to see her in this way that you didn't know before?
Yeah, I mean, like each different medium gave me a different part of her. So the first thing I really discovered was the audio. So it's just pure audio of her interviewing photographers. It's not video. But they were on these 7-inch reels from the 70s, and the audio quality, I don't know if you're familiar with like, analog audio, but it's so incredible. It actually records like the magnetic vibrations. I don't know how to say it in scientific terms, but of the voice. And so it's very human. And when I heard it, I felt like I was in the room with her. So it was like a very powerful experience. And also her voice was familiar to me. Even though I thought I had no memories of her, all of a sudden I realized that I actually did remember her voice. So that was one of the most powerful things that happened. But then along the way, I also found moving image of her. I found photographs, and her journals were incredible. So each piece kind of filled in another part of what was missing. in my knowledge of her.
Something that I found so interesting in the movie was you talk about the grieving process about someone that you necessarily didn't know or remember. And I thought that was so powerful because I think there's so many times where we, lose a family member, lose a friend, lose, a coworker, lose somebody, and you know what those memories are. But to kind of have a void in your life of grieving that, I thought that was so powerful because I think that happens to so many people, and you just put it so beautifully into words, with this film. I mean, talk a little bit about just that in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's hard to even put into words, to be honest, because it doesn't really make sense that you could miss somebody you never knew. But obviously, the mother is like possibly the most important person in a child's life, or definitely, or could be. So, so it's just this sort of primal thing that you miss, and it's more of a feeling than anything else. And because I didn't remember that, all I was left with was this feeling of longing and missing her. So I think that was really the driving force that like made me feel like I had to make this film or to really find her. Um, but yeah, I mean, it took me a long time to be able to even articulate that because it was just something I had lived with my whole life and never really knew how to articulate, especially and when you're making a movie, it has to be also like cinematic, hopefully, and well written. So it not only was I trying to figure out how I felt, but I also had to somehow convey it in a way that, felt like a movie. And that was extremely challenging, but ultimately like rewarding to feel like I was able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, because I remember, our times in college, and I remember, you told me that your mom had passed, and I think we've had a couple of conversations,
Yeah.
but I don't remember it being a lot of what, you and I talked
No.
about. Was there like ebbs and flows for you growing up as far as like how much you would kind of keep it inside, how much you would share with other people, and just maybe kind of ultimately leading to the point of like the best way to share the story and your story is through this film.
I mean, I never really dwelled on it that much when I was growing up, to be honest. Partly because, like I said, it was just always how it was. So it wasn't like I had her, I remember her, and then she was gone and I could think about her. It was just like I didn't even know who she was. So I think I just, got went on with my life and, did my best. And what I did do growing up though is I had many, many mother figures. So like as a kid, I would spend a lot of time with my friends' moms, with, family, women in a family, like my grandmother, aunts, who all became sort of my mother figures. So I definitely was looking for it as a kid, but it wasn't something that I consciously thought about.
We get to see your dad in the film and your uncle in the film as well too. I mean, talk a little bit about the impact of your mom's passing and basically, how they related to you as far as explaining things, being there for you.
Mother, you just have to figure out like,
Yeah.
how am I going to survive in the world? And part of that is, you know, finding other nurturing sources, I suppose.
One of the most like powerful parts of the film is you get to see you as a baby with your mom, and I believe you describe it as like the perfect part of time
Yeah.
where the two of you were together. What were some of those emotions that you felt seeing that, putting that together in the film, getting to see other people, as you've gone to different festivals, witness that moment? Because we don't, when we start the film, we
Yeah.
necessarily don't know that that part is going to be in there.
Right. Yeah, that to me is the sort of unspoken emotional core of the film, for me personally. And I think, well, like, yeah, like if you grow up without a mother, like, weirdly, there's like a sense of shame almost because, you know, you feel like there's something wrong with you because it's like weird not to have like your mom around. And maybe people who didn't have a father feel the same way. I don't know. But so when I saw myself in this footage with her, I felt like complete, like, oh, this is a normal kid who has a like who has a mom and everything's perfect, like I'm a happy little kid. And I didn't remember that time. So it was like a really powerful way to see myself that I hadn't before. And it was a gift actually to know that that time existed, even if I didn't have the conscious memory of it. So yeah, it was that like every bit of archival that I discovered, and that was specifically the Super 8 footage that my grandmother had shot, sort of had a gift like that of discovery and something I was learning about myself or about my mother through the materials. And so that particular thing was one of the most powerful things that I got out of it.
I want to talk about the comparisons because obviously I actually have reverse comparisons of the people in the film because I had no, I knew you and I got to see your mom, but already knowing you and a lot of the people that you interview, whether it was the photographers, your mom's friends, people in former buildings that she lived in, or your relatives, they kind of see you, they see her in you. But talk a little bit about some of those similarities that you maybe necessarily didn't realize, as far as your artistic nature. And also, like the one thing too that I've always admired about you is that I've always lived in Chicago. This has always been my home, and if yes, of course, I've traveled and gone other places for work, but you were like, I'm going to go to London. I'm going to New York. I'm going to LA. I,
Yeah.
I don't know if you went to Spain on a trip or
Good. I
you went
lived
there
in
to.
Spain.
Yeah, you lived in Spain, and isn't this crazy? We haven't talked in forever, and I still remember all these things.
That is amazing. I'm very impressed.
but but that was always one of the things that I admired about you is that you had this spirit of I see an opportunity, I see an adventure, I see something I want to do, and I want to go to these places. And I always fascinated when you came back or that when we reconnected of what you learned or what happened while you were at a particular job or working on a particular project or a place you went to learn from and seeing your mom having that same kind of spirit and traveling the world for her work. I mean, that was
Yeah.
just like that's when my jaw dropped when I was watching the film.
That's cool. Well, like I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels true to me, which is like, the Jewish people have had to be nomadic and, from various reasons of expulsion, etc. And um interestingly, my mother says she wrote a autobiography. She started to write a book and she didn't finish it, but there's 3 chapters that I found, which is incredible. And we include a little excerpt of that in the film. And she says that her parents were scared to leave America because they had been persecuted and their families had been killed in Eastern Europe. So they stayed close to home. And her reaction was to do the opposite. She wanted to go to the far flung corners of the earth and explore everything. Um, so she kind of, but as far as I'm concerned, like for me, I don't have an explanation beyond that, like, there's like a nomadic gene that I must have that, it's just like something I'm driven to do. But also I was born in England. So I was born in another country. My parents are from 2 different countries. Their parents are from probably 5 different countries. So it's kind of in my blood in a way that we're not from one place. Interestingly, my mother felt very American and my father feels very British, but I don't feel like I'm anything in particular, like as far as a nationality. So that's part of why I'm like always looking for home, I guess.
Well, and that's so interesting too because I think those who are born in the Midwest in the Chicagoland area, you have this sense of home, of a sense of community. But if you weren't born here, and if your family has a lot of different places
Yeah.
that they're from or that they call home, that there's not one place that's like tying you down. I don't know if that's the right phrase to use, but
Yeah.
one place that you feel. But you
Feel for
also,
sure.
I think, on the outside, you look at somebody like you who just has this sense of adventure that you're like, I wish I had more of that. Or look at the things she's accomplishing when you're not afraid to go somewhere or do something or take on something that where you're like, well, I don't know if I want to go to New York by myself to, um, interview for this job, or I don't know if I'm ready to go to Europe by myself
Yeah.
to do something. And you always came back, I mean, you're always the greatest, but you always came back like better, with this experience under your belt. And I always admired that about you. Um, and I just love that your mom had the exact same spirit, but it was something that like, through the cosmos that you were able to kind of have that similarity, that it wasn't something that she necessarily passed down to you, but just something that you both
Yeah.
had or continue to have.
Well, that's really it's interesting, like the things, like the whole nature versus nurture thing, because you would assume like you get certain things from your parents because you watch them do it, but I learned, because I didn't know her, that actually most of the I have lots in common with her, down to like even our taste and stuff. And so that's obviously not something I observed her do. And that's really fascinating to me, that we do inherit so much from our parents, that a lot of it is just nature, apparently. So, and I've seen that, like, and I have friends who were adopted or have adopted siblings, and the adopted sibling often does not have the same interests as the adopted parents, or their adopted parents. So I think that's really interesting, like, just as an aside. But yeah, the travel and adventure thing, I think it does lead to many adventures. I think there's, two sides to everything. It's like, but then I'm also like maybe not as rooted as I want to be, or, like searching for a sense of home and whatever. So I think, yeah, it's like anything else, but you kind of make choices, and then you get the benefits and the the challenges of whatever that might be.
Oh, exactly. I want to talk about your time at Scholastic and your mom's time at Scholastic.
Sure. I mean, I was there as an intern for a summer, basically.
Did Were you aware that your mom was there at that, or had been there had worked for them at that time? Or was it a connection
Yeah.
you made afterwards? Or was
No,
that the reason why you did that?
that was the reason I went. So like, and I went when I was in college, and when we knew each other. Um, I was looking for internships, and I was, as we just said, like I had similar interests. So I was in writing and editing and English major, and as was my mother. And so Scholastic had an internship, and so I was like, well, this would be perfect. Like I'll get to know where she worked and whatever. So I applied for that. Um, but yeah, at that time I was 19, and I didn't really understand, the full context of what she had done there or anything like that. I didn't think too deeply about it. I just thought it sounded like a cool thing to do.
Yeah, well, I mean that's also too. It's very influential, especially during those like college years. Because I remember like my summers was, I'm going to, work a part-time job. I'm going to do an internship here, and to see somebody going to New York, during that time, or going to Europe during that time, it puts it into your mind of like the possibilities of like what you could do in life, And so I thank you for always kind of opening up that door and being that friend to me growing up.
Oh, cool. Well, oh, happy that's how it was for you.
Let's talk a little bit about the film festival. You're going to be here on the 23rd and the 24th, screening the film. One's an afternoon screening, the other one is an evening one. Introducing the film, Q&A. Tell me what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, so it's the 60th annual Chicago International Film Festival. It's playing at the Gene Siskel Film Center those 2 days. I'm going to be doing Q&As after the screenings. But yeah, I mean, for me, this festival is a really, really important one because of my mother being from there, because I grew up there. And so like lots of friends and family will be coming to the screenings, and so yeah, like any festival experience like that is special to me when there's a really personal tie. And this one is one of the most personal. Her best friend is actually coming in from San Francisco. And then some of my mother's first cousins are going to be there. So, and actually at the moment I'm heading to Columbus, Ohio, where my mother's brother lives, and he's going to be seeing the film on the big screen at a festival there for the first time. So this
That
is
is
sort of
well, Rachel. I'm coming to the screenings. I cannot wait to see you in person. Thank you so much for your time today. It was great to hear your voice. It's been a long time since I've seen you, a long time since I heard your voice. This film is incredible. I think there's so many times when there's either a relative, especially sharing your journey, and you never really know what somebody's going through or what someone has gone through. Maybe meeting them just in a work environment, a school environment, a neighbor environment. We didn't really get into it so much, but adopted, foster care, surrogacy, single parents. I mean, people that were raised by their grandparents. There's so many different types of families out there that I'm just naming a few models, but people might have a sense of this. And obviously, something that was cool with your mom was that she had this wonderful career, and you got to see it in this way. where maybe some of these future generations, whether people are active on social media, but kind of get a sense of what their family or relatives, were like, and just kind of seeing the legacy that, that people can leave behind. That it's just it's so fascinating.
Yes, thank you so much, Rudy. Yeah, it was great to hear your voice too. It sounds exactly the way it did in 2000, was it 2000? I don't even know.
Yeah, it was
1999.
it was it was about 2000, yeah, ish.
The 90s. Like we were hanging out in the 90s.
We were hanging out in the 90s, and it's making the fashion's making a comeback. So I'm sure I still have some of my old clothes. So we
I do too. I have a tank top from when I was like 17 or something still. So
awesome, Rachel. Thank
one
you
of
so
those
much for your time
Chicago
today.
thrift stores.
Oh, I know, I love it. ChicagoFilmFestival.com for tickets and for info on screening of A Photographic Memory, and as well as over the 120 films that are going to be at the festival. And Rachel, we will see you very, very soon.
Thanks, Rudy. See you soon. Bye.
Bye bye.